I'm your host, Dino, and get ready to be inspired as you learn exactly how to own your role. And welcome once again, everybody, to the Own Your Role podcast. I'm excited to have you here again. Thank you so much for joining us each week as we share with you some real and interesting stories with entrepreneurs that I find fascinating and people that I think will help increase your life. As you know, we get a variety of different types of guests on the show. And I'm so grateful for all of you that have written in, have told me that you've listened to the podcast. I was at an event just last weekend and had a few of you come up to me. Actually, one person who had hired me to speak at their group came to me and said, you know what, I've only heard your podcast. I've never heard you speak in real life. And I was really appreciative of that. And I'm also super appreciative of people who share this podcast with their friends and their colleagues, knowing that our goal here is to give you the best practices for your business possible. And that's why we bring on the caliber of guests that we do. And today is no different. I get to speak with Richard Parker, who is somebody I actually got to meet as a pre-meet a couple of weeks ago. And after reading his bio and his mission for his business, I thought this is right up the alley of what we're doing here on Own Your Role. So I know you're going to enjoy it. Get ready. If you're on a treadmill, get ready to take some notes somehow, maybe voice memos. If you're sitting at your desk, make sure you get some notes that way. If not, make sure that you share this podcast with somebody who you think might find it useful. Again, thank you for all being here. And let's get started with our next episode. Richard, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, it's going to be great. I told you when we first met that I really liked reading through your mission and understanding how important it was to help people learn how to buy businesses. It's something that I'm really unfamiliar with. It's something that I have always been just curious about how that works, if I could do that or not, why I would want to do that instead of just building up my own business. So I think you're going to be just a joy of knowledge, and I really appreciate you being here. But as we do on every episode, we want to start off with your story of how did you get involved in this space? Is this something you wanted to do growing up? What's the story?
Well, thanks again for having me. So going back in time, and I won't bore you with the long version. I was always entrepreneurial, even as a kid. Always had a job. I grew up in Canada. I was shoveling snow in the winter, washing cars in the summertime, delivering newspapers. Always trying to make a few dollars. I come from a very lower middle class family. We didn't want for anything, but we certainly weren't affluent. And I was thinking about actually earlier today. At one point, my father passed away 10 years ago. He was always very generous with giving me money when I had a job. If I didn't have a job, he wouldn't offer to give me any money. But when I had a job, he always asked me if I need any money. So I was thinking about reflecting upon that today. So when I finished school, I started working originally in the clothing industry, which was quite popular in Montreal. Then got involved in the consumer products business, working for a company. I grew very quickly within the company. It was a very fast-growing company, typical of the toy business. Toy gets hot and the company's on fire. I was 29 years old. I was making $72,000 a year, which was quite a lot at that point. They were very generous owners. And through my brilliance, I managed to blow $60,000 in the stock market.
Oh, wow.
And which was devastating. And I realized that there was only three ways I was going to get out of this mess. I was either going to win the lotto, and I don't buy lotto tickets. I could go to Vegas, and I'm not a gambler. Or I can go into my own business. The fourth one was borrow money from my parents, but that certainly wasn't an option. So realize, like, if I don't make a dent in this debt may never go away. And so I decided to go into my own business. The timing was quite good because the company that I was with was selling off some of the divisions, mine included, and I negotiated with the company that acquired our division that I would train their staff in exchange for getting the exclusive rights to the products we were handling for Eastern Canada. And so that was my first foray into what I call legitimate businesses. I had bought a couple before when I was younger, but they weren't really serious businesses that I could grow substantially. And within short order of going into that business, and the products that I was selling were consumer products, infant products, think bibs, bath towels, pacifiers, squeeze toys, etc. And we sold them to retailers in Canada. And I recognized very quickly that no matter how good a job that I did selling these products, at retail, they weren't getting displayed properly. We would run ads and the product got stuck in the back room. And the retailers at that point, especially in Canada, were going more towards self-service, so there wasn't staff. So I started looking into that and started building and buying a couple of companies that were in the retail service business, where we would go in and actually do the work that normally store staff would do with getting the merchandise onto the shelves, displaying properly. And I bought one of my first companies, was I think probably company number 4. That was a company that was already in the business. I could not afford to buy their company, but I just knew it'd be perfect for my business as an offshoot. And so I negotiated a pretty attractive deal with the owner of the company that gave him a substantial piece of the business going forward. He bought into my vision. I knew it was going to work. I mean, I'm not a cocky, egotistical guy, but I knew it was a
You could
perfect
see the
fit.
path. Yeah.
100%. That's the exact word. I could see the path. And was a company he wanted originally, was way back when, wanted at least $100,000 up front, which I didn't have, but I convinced him to do it for far less than that and join me. And that company, from that initial very small investment, grew that business to a $4.5 million business with 200 staff across Canada, which was
Wow.
sickeningly profitable because we were selling labor and we were doing this tremendous service. And then I acquired some other companies within that space, a infant products company, an event marketing company, an Asian trading company, and they were all doing quite well. And then I acquired the rights to Sega Video for Eastern Canada at the time that Sega just blew up. I know this was blind luck. I mean, this was dumb
Wow.
luck. I mean, I just happened to be in the right place at the right time when Sega's business, exploded. And within a few years, I knew what was going to happen. I started making more money than the entire senior executives at Sega, so they bought me out, which I knew was going to happen.
Yeah.
It's very typical as a distributor or manufacturer's rep. When you start doing too well, company buys you out. And I solved for that in the contract because I knew it was inevitable. I sold the business to Sega and I relocated to Florida. And my children were very young. I had 3 kids at the time. I have 4 now and 1 grandson. And started looking at one particular business that I was looking to acquire. Prior to moving down here, I had done some consulting in M&A because I started getting a reputation for being able to buy businesses, but it was more ad hoc and casual, helping people. And when I came down to Florida, I got involved looking at a transaction for a company that was a distributor for Maytag commercial washers and dryers. Typically what they sold to dormitories, apartment buildings where people would pay for the laundry. That model has changed quite a bit. But what happened was they had a very large sales component, a service and a repair and a parts department. And I had negotiated a pretty good deal. I was excited about the business. I started getting really involved in the due diligence. And I soon found out that the company was a complete mess. It wasn't. I'm not going to represent that it was intentional, but it certainly was like a plate of spaghetti. They were taking money from one company, putting it into the other company, weren't
Ooh.
reporting properly. Ooh is right. The inventory was a disaster, and so at every point, it really was problematic. And I told the owner I was doing some work at their place. Actually, I think it was that particular day, verifying some inventory, and I advised the owner that there was just too many problems. I couldn't figure anything out. Right, they're like who's who in the zoo. It was just the parts company was selling to the service company, one company that used to they owned their own machines that they were generating the revenue, which wasn't part of it. They were putting money in periodically into the other company to prop it up. So like I said, a complete plate of spaghetti, impossible to get to the bottom of it. And I left the place. I walked out. I remember standing in the parking lot and I thinking to myself, the average schmuck would have bought this business. Like it was only because I had done this so many times. I'm not that smart, but
Yeah.
I had done it plenty of times. I said, like the average person would have bought this business and would have made a terrible mistake. It wasn't a massive acquisition. It was a little over $1 million, but that money would have evaporated.
Sure.
And so it really excited me about like, what does the average person do who wants to buy a business? Like what's out there related to resources and information and support and advisory services. And I'm very intellectually curious as far as wanting to, I love learning about new projects or new things. And I started jumping in. It was early stages of the internet. And I realized that every point that I looked at, there was really nothing concrete for
Mm.
individuals looking to buy businesses. On a lower level, think Main Street USA type businesses. And so I had over the years, I'd looked at hundreds of businesses. I kept terrific notes of every situation. If this happened, I did this. If that happened, I did that. What was the outcome? What could have worked better? Proper, real good after action reports related to any failed deals or successful deals. And I decided to put all of my files into a program that would really take people by the hand and explain to them what they need to know, what they need to do, and how to do it. And keeping in mind that the resources available, whether they business brokers or lawyers and accountant, they didn't provide enough value to individuals that were going to invest their hard-earned money in something that they had no idea about before. And my goal was strictly to be able to put my then life's work into a program, right?
Mm.
And just to help people. I never had any intention of turning it into a business. The night before we launched the program, and we launched it online, it's 20 years ago, it's constantly updated, of course. My wife asked me how many think I'm going to sell. And my answer then is the same as it is now. If I can help one person buy the right business or avoid buying the wrong one, it'll be worth the effort. Well, lo and behold, here we are a number of years later, sold over 100,000 of these. We've helped people in about 80 countries.
Wow.
It's been unbelievable. And, we keep it very inexpensive because the agenda and the mission to just help people. I love this type of work. It's incredibly gratifying. I pick up my phone or answer my emails all day long. I don't charge people to have questions as they go through the process. So it's just been phenomenally gratifying. And I've acquired some other businesses along the way up at this point and done some more M&A. And so sorry for the
Well,
long-winded
that's
answer
one
to
of
your
the things
question.
that's well, one of the things that's interesting about like when I was reading your bio and when we had that first initial call was around like, you really want people just to be able to have access to the information in as easy a format and as an affordable format as possible, especially people who are just now starting to figure out or think about what if I did buy a business, what would it take, what would it mean if I and how do I analyze a business. You had the forethought and the ability to say, all right, I'm going to look into all this stuff because I know what I'm looking for. But like you said, if somebody didn't know what they're looking for and on the outside looked at nice, shiny, great business opportunity, might jump at that and lose their money, lose their investment, lose whatever it might be. But your passion is really in helping people understand this. And I love the line in your bio where you say something around that you love waking up every day getting to do what you do. Like it's a joy to be able to do what you do. Where does that come from? Is there growing up in Canada, having your entrepreneur mindset, right? Where does this idea to number one, understand business, number two, be able to evaluate businesses as well as you do, and number three, make it easy for anybody to understand. Where does that come from? Where does that mindset come from?
So it's a three-tiered question, and I'll try to answer each one effectively. Um, I think the mindset comes from I always wanted to have more things than my parents had.
Hmm.
My father was a real hardworking guy, and so was my mother. And my father, you'll enjoy this. I don't mean to age you or but my father was an aluminum siding salesman, a
Yeah.
door-to-door aluminum siding salesman, and I did that with him every summer. And he worked his ass off, and he was a
Hmm.
great guy. He finished school when he was 12, right?
Hmm.
So things have changed a little bit. Um, and yet, despite any formal education, he was a real street smart, savvy guy, but worked
Hmm.
his butt off. And it was very much a case of, someone, I saw him spend his whole life earning a living and he forgot to make any money.
Uh, yeah.
And so that always resonated with me. And I just wanted stuff that was nicer and an easier way than my parents had, right? And even though I'm not, I don't think of myself as materialistic in that regard. So that I think the mindset or original to have some better stuff or an easier way of life was part of it.
Well,
I always,
before you go
yeah,
on to the next question, sorry to interrupt you, but I think it's very interesting. And that's kind of why I asked the question is I feel like so much of what most people do, even, whether you're successful or not, whatever you want to call success, but there's that element of childhood that we learn something, whether it be the positive side of things, so like, oh, I want to do like that, or the negative of, oh, I don't want to do that, but ends up being a positive in your life. I often make the joke around my own family that I've made a lot of money off my parents' divorce, right? Because it was such a traumatic thing for me growing up and having that moment in my life. But it also started me on the journey of wanting to understand relationships and how to communicate with people and to connect with people. And I'm naturally very curious about that anyway, but it just created a different desire for me. And I can see that with you. It's not like it bugs me when people kind of misconstrue this of your dad did nothing wrong. He did what he knew. he actually did better than what he probably, quote unquote, should have been able to do because of his hard work and his street smarts. But building on top of that, on standing on those shoulders of the things he taught you, made you go, oh, if dad was able to do this level, what could I do with more information and more knowledge and more education? I think that's really fascinating if we look at that in our own psyche of entrepreneurs or any type of business owner or leader in that way. So I sorry to interrupt you. I just always think it's fascinating to see where it goes back to in our childhood.
Well, I think it's a great observation because the overarching theme to that is, what do you learn from lessons, right?
Yeah.
Good ones, failures or successes, right? And you should be able to learn more from failures. You
Yeah.
should be able to learn more from being wrong. I mean, if you're right about something, you don't learn anything because you knew that already. So if you're wrong about something,
Mhm.
you should be able to learn if you're open-minded. Failures will teach you a lot if you process them properly and not let your ego get into the way. And so when you reference, your family's divorce, the lesson learned there is, I want to do better at relationships, or understand, the dynamics of a relationship, so that that type of thing doesn't happen to me necessarily, and I can help prevent it happening to other people. And
Yeah.
so, lessons learned are infinitely better from difficult situations, at least in
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
experience, right?
Totally. Yep.
When I was much younger, I was probably too hard-headed, a bit of an ego and some insecurity, and wouldn't allow those lessons to penetrate the brain. But as you get older and you recognize that there's a golden opportunity for incredible lessons that will carry you the rest of your life in those difficult times. It's just how you reflect upon them and how you dust yourself off, and make sure you don't make sure you don't repeat the mistake the next
Yeah.
time.
Totally.
So
Yeah.
so then, related to parents, or related to, I think, mindset, and it wasn't necessarily only by no means materialistic. It was just a better way, and seeing that hard work. I mean, the influence of hard work, it certainly resonated with me. My mother at one point, I think she had 3 jobs, so they worked really, really hard. And the other part, in answer to your question, was, as it relates sort of this idea with helping people. I think that was one of the questions.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah. Why did that?
is I guess I've always found it incredibly gratifying. Like, it's almost self-serving. Like, I've gotten tremendous. I coached kids hockey when I was 12, 13, 14 years old. I still play 3, 4 times a week. For an old guy, it's not too bad. But the gratification of helping others, I've always found incredibly enjoyable. I mean, one of my first things that I did was, I had a paper route for 12 years old, delivering the Sunday Express, and used to work on tips, and like a penny a piece. They were 15 cents for the paper, and people used to give you a quarter. And then when it went up to 20 cents, you'd only get a nickel tip. So it was really pissed me off. But but what I did was, I ended up buying and acquiring a bunch of little other routes in the neighborhood. From 100 papers went up to about 1,000, and I sold them all off to kids in the neighborhood.
Wow.
But I didn't charge them. I said, look, you'll work for the tips, because I knew I got a penny, or it started at 2 and then went to a penny a piece. I said, you delivered a paper, you don't have to pay me anything, you just work on tips. And they were all thrilled. But I had 1,000 papers,
Wow.
and you're making a penny a piece plus my tips. So I was making, sometimes up to about $20 a week, which was a whole lot of money in 1973, right? I
Yeah.
think the average, I think the average individuals make about 100. I think the average salary is about $5,000 a year. So I was doing pretty good for a 12-year-old kid. But I
Sure.
enjoyed seeing my buddies thrive, right? So that was
Yeah.
great. So I think it goes back pretty far. And I've always been, helpful in nature. My parents have always been helpful to others. It's just, to me, it's part of life. It's an enjoyable thing, and so it's part of my DNA, without trying to sound like a martyr. It really is part of my DNA.
Yeah.
Still enjoy it. Like, it's great. It's great satisfaction, and it's always continued.
Well, the fact of the matter is that we live in a world where information marketing is so huge. I mean, I'm in information marketing, and there are people out there who sell courses, teach courses for multiple thousands of dollars to learn how to do this. And then it's like a rabbit hole. It's then you can upgrade to this thing and upgrade to that thing. And I'm not knocking that model at all. I participate in part of that model as well. But you've decided to make sure that it's almost democratized, like the information that you have and that you've gained out of all these years has been democratized through what you do. tell people a little bit about like how you help. And by the way, most of our viewers are people who already have a job. Like we're not focusing our audience. Our target audience is not people who are looking for something to do. They're looking for people who either want to add on to what they already do, want to diversify, or want to look at what's next if they decide to have another evolution in their work experience. Which again, we both come from a generation where our parents didn't think that way, right? You got the job, you stayed there for the 40 years, you retired, you lived in Boca Raton or Arizona for the next 30 years of your life before you pass on. We don't have that same idea in our head. So what made you decide, number one, what made you decide to try to create this model that's more approachable or available for everybody? And number two, tell us a little bit about that model.
Okay, so you're absolutely correct. There is a tremendous amount of information products on the marketplace. And while I don't agree with that upsell model, I don't disparage it. That's anybody free to make their living how they want to make their living. I just really oppose it because I think, I've bought information products over the years where it always seemed like what I got was nowhere near what I thought I was going to get.
Right.
Right. And so, things are promises and and also the support, because you can get a pile of information, but sometimes you need some hand holding over and above that. And so there's a couple of things that were very important for me. Number one is I don't need the money. So that's when you start with that, that's very helpful.
Yeah.
So, and for me is I didn't even intend this to become a business. I just wanted to help people. It remains that fact. I've had people or consultants or marketing companies coming over the years and tell me I should be charging 10 times the amount that we do for the product, and you should be doing the upsell. I just don't believe in the model. And I've had wonderful comments back from people who've bought the product and been incredibly successful. So you should be charging much more. Well, that's all wonderful. I appreciate it, but I have no interest in doing it. To me, it's like you're supposed to give someone a ton of value, and that was my goal. So the first thing was the model that my model, number one, is by and large to cover every possible subject matter that individuals are going to come across. But more important than that is not leave someone standing standing there holding the bag. By that I mean, I could try to outline every possible scenario that comes up, but I can't cover everything. I mean, I'm doing this for 30 years. I still learn something new in every deal. And that's for someone who, again,
I
I'm
would
not
hope
that.
so, right?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
not that smart. I'm just doing it a long time, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So anybody who's never done this, right, no matter how good the information is, and I know it's pretty good, there's still going to be situations that are unique.
Sure.
And so
Yeah.
I felt very strongly that if someone has a problem or a question or a situation, call me, email me. I'm happy to answer your question. I never charge them for that. I'm just not looking for this idea of sell someone a product, then trade them up to a personal consulting, then trade them up to, like, excuse my French, a bullshit mastermind group. And all of a sudden someone spent like $300 and now they're in the hole for 25,000. I just think it's wrong. And again, everybody can do what they want. It's their business. I just think it's just in my nature. I want to deliver tremendous value. The other thing was I never wanted anyone in my model, right, to ever think that they shouldn't learn this information because price was an issue. Like,
Oh, interesting.
I just wanted to make it dumb easy, right? And so that whole model, and again, it fits so much with the fact that I didn't develop this as a business, and so it's worked incredibly well because part of the challenge when you sell a product online is to demonstrate your sincerity. Like, I could sit here and tell you, and we could have a nice conversation, and I can say all these things online, and it's a sales pitch. People could, people perceive it as a sales pitch, but it's being able to convey sincerity is very difficult.
Sure.
And I would rather someone say, you know what, this sounds too good to be true. I'm not even going to do it. That's okay. I understand the internet works that way, but I really learned a couple things, which is, and I've tried to be very upfront with people. I am very upfront with people related to what they're going to encounter and whether people choose to purchase the material or not. I mean, it doesn't really matter that much. My lifestyle doesn't change, but I've learned that if you tell people what they want to hear, you can make a sale, right? But if you tell people what they need to hear, you could really make a difference.
It's true.
And so try to have that philosophy going into things and saying, here's what you're faced with. If you're even thinking about buying a business, right, and you're in a job, Well, you really do owe it to yourself to at least explore what it's about,
Mm.
right? You don't, you may not do it. This is doable for anybody. Doesn't mean everybody's going to do it, but you should at least explore that. And if you want to explore that, I'm going to present it to you in a way that's going to make it dumb easy for you to acquire the information to learn whether or not you want to do it. And so that, I think, is hopefully explains like the overarching model of how I've approached this.
Well, I'm always for anything that's dumb easy because that's the story of my life.
Hey, you and me both.
Oh man, if I it's like break it down. Matter of fact, I'm doing a whole program right now that I'm creating around uh, intergenerational communication, right? Because we have so many people that work in businesses together where you've got the millennials and then you've got the Generation X and you got baby boomers and Gen Y and all that. And one of the things that they talk about is how most millennials and or Gen Xers and baby boomers, which is our world, uh, rather have things just like, okay, just give me the bullet points, give me the stuff that I need to know so I can go and fix that or do that. I'm like, yep, that's totally me. Like, whereas your Gen Z and Gen Yers, they want to understand why this is going to be good for bigger purposes like humanity, or how this is going to help them, affect their life in any way. If it's going to interrupt their life, they don't want it, but if it's going to affect it in a positive way, they want it. Anyways, that's me. I'm just like, give me dumb smart stuff. I like that stuff.
I'm 100% in agreement. And maybe it's because like we're both getting older, so we don't have time for the explanation. We just want to
Yeah.
cut right to the chase. But it's also that sort of philosophy has impacted a lot of things. Like I'm coaching hockey for, over 40 years. And it used to be old school, drill it into people, right? And now
Yes.
even at the higher levels, like my son played junior hockey, very high junior level hockey, and you speak to some of the pro coaches or whatever, they have to, really understand the individual now versus this old school yelling and screaming, and have to explain things in detail as to, like the uh, action and stimulus, like why they're doing this and what they can expect as the outcome. So,
Right.
it is more generational. I don't know if one's better than the other, but
Right.
you and I are more in, I think, aligned philosophically, and it is probably, it is, an age thing or a cultural thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so tell us how, like, all the different styles of businesses that you talk about when it comes to building. I noticed on your website you talk about buying businesses in Australia and was it UK?
Yeah, we have two industry specific guides for those particular countries. Our main program is how to buy a good business at a great price. That is the guide that covers how to buy a business. And
But
then
what's
from
interesting is that I'm sorry to interrupt, but just
no, no, please.
that like just kind of struck me was there were all types of businesses. You had a business there on the internet, right? How you can buy internet based businesses, which quite frankly to me, I probably double take to that, because the thing I always think about when building a business or buying a business, if you buy a real retail store or something like that, you're dealing with people and you're dealing with inventory, you're dealing with stuff like that. And I was like, oh, internet business, that's interesting. That I never thought about buying somebody else's internet business, right? That's already there. So tell us all about like the types of businesses that you help people buy. Are there any caps on that? The types of business, like what's the best way to go to? We had I don't know, you probably don't know this, but we had just recently on a lady who does franchises. And I was shocked at the type of franchises that you can buy out there, like tree trimming that are national franchises and stuff like that. So I'd love to hear some of these, and also some of your favorites, and if there are favorites that you like to play with.
Okay, so I actually listened to that podcast. Was
Oh,
it Vicky Daily or Daily or what was it? Uh,
something daily. Yeah.
yeah, she was
Kim Daily.
terrific.
Kim Daily.
Yeah, yeah, Kim, right? Sorry, yeah, she was terrific. And franchisers definitely part of. So the if you think about conceptually think about Main Street USA and smaller businesses,
Hmm.
right? So whatever you're driving down the street or a more industrial area, and that could be everything from retail to distribution to plumbing, air conditioning, pest control, alarm monitoring businesses, home services, business services, smaller businesses, Main Street USA. We've had clients that bought businesses 25, $30 million, but typically Main Street USA type businesses, not as as a colleague of mine calls shitty little businesses. A lot of them are really good businesses, but a wide array, right? Now, in the process of buying a business, whether it be an Online is a little bit of an exception, but whether it be a retail business, a distribution business, a manufacturing business, a service business, a home service business, a business service. If you take the entire process of buying a business from the day one that you're thinking about it to the end of the road when you get to the finish line and close in a deal, 80% of the process repeats itself regardless of the industry, at least. Because the process of coming up and determining what type of business is right for you, how to find businesses, dealing with business brokers, valuing businesses, doing the negotiation, conducting your arranging financing, negotiating deal terms, conducting your due diligence, investigating the competition and the suppliers and the employees and the industry and the market, that repeats itself over and over again, regardless of the industry. You sometimes get industry
That makes
specific related,
sense.
related to certain valuations of businesses that may change. Online businesses are a little different because you've got to know what you're buying. I mean,
Yeah.
what you see online, it may not even be real. That's the
Yeah.
first
Yeah.
thing. The second thing is you buy a business and you typically have a non-compete in place with the former owner, which prevents him or her from becoming your competitor for a certain period of time in a certain geographical area. Well, how are you going to do that online?
Yeah.
They're going
You
to
can't.
open up anywhere. You could be anything and be anywhere when you own an online
Yep.
business.
And
So
you can
there's,
shelter so much of that too, because
of
it's not
course.
necessarily you. It could be another. Yeah, sure.
So you have to be very cautious. And so for us, we have our main guide, which really covers everything. And then we do have some industry specific guides: how to buy a restaurant, gas station, retail store, liquor store, online business, UK business, and Australian business. The UK business was because I did a lot of joint venture work with a company in the UK, and there were some peculiarities. The Australian business is more personal. My wife is an Aussie, and originally I decided that maybe I'll do an Australian version because I can write off the cost of the trip to go over there and do my research, right? So by and large, someone who's buying a business, it's going to repeat itself. The other thing that I love about this, even though we update our materials every year, I mean, and sometimes they're more anecdotal. If I died and came back in 20 years, I'd have to rewrite maybe 10 pages out of 550 because
Uh,
it's been the same. There's
yeah.
certain things that happen. Yes, interest
Interesting.
rates may change. The impact
Regulation, stuff like that. Sure.
regulation, the impact of COVID or the pandemic on valuations,
Sure.
a recession. I mean, there's some of those shorter term things that have impacted the industry, but for the most part, it's the same and has been the same for many years. The danger, what I'm seeing happen, which really has been an incentive for me to get really re-engaged in this and have these type of conversations with people such as yourself, which I greatly appreciate. The internet has provided, has been the greatest blessing and the worst curse for people looking to buy businesses. It's made the access easy to find businesses for sale, but there is so much misinformation and so much misleading information that people get. Some of the stats in this industry are horrific. Like 90% of the people who begin to search to buy a business never complete a transaction.
Mm.
And 80% of the businesses listed for sale online never sell. And so, because there's so much misinformation or generic information, and now you have the proliferation of what you've spoken to earlier of people talking about, buy a business making $250,000 for no money down in 30 days. I mean, it's crazy, and people, become they're susceptible to that, right? Because it all sounds great if you don't know.
Sure, of course. The other side of that though is here's where my mind goes is if a business is successful and that person who owns the business is making money, why do most people sell? And I would automatically think if that business is successful enough to where they want to sell it, I'm gonna pay top dollar for a business and has all the money from that business been squeezed out of it to the point to where I'm paying top dollar and then I've got to work even harder to try to make any more money out of it. Does that make sense? Like that's my
Makes perfect. It makes
curiosity of
perfect
it. I'm
sense.
concerned about.
It makes perfect sense, and it's a great question. So the first part is why people want to sell. There's a whole host of reasons. People
Well,
just
sure.
get
Yeah,
to
that
us,
makes sense.
get to a certain age. Other reasons people get bored. There's all
Divorce.
the
Yeah.
more the morbid reasons: death, divorce, medical, etc. And businesses, on average, smaller businesses sell on average every 5 years. And so there's always a large turnover. And a lot of these you don't even hear about because they go to family or friends or whatever. And,
Mm.
the ones you hear about, let's say through typically business for sale websites. I mean, that those are typically controlled by business brokers. That's only about 10% of all the sales. Most of them are friends, family, or competitors, strategic sales. So the first part is there's a whole host of reasons, and you want to get to the reason of why someone is selling, because oftentimes the underpinnings of that could be problematic. Right? They may see the writing on the wall. And businesses typically have a trajectory, right? They start off at the beginning and you do this climb, right? And they go from a startup, if they get to the point of being great, and they eventually decline. I mean, one of the things that I talk about is, I don't tell people how to buy the perfect business, how to buy fantastic business, how to buy the greatest business. I say how to buy a good business, because you want a business that's in between the startup and the great pinnacle. It's good, right? And it still has trajectory going for it, because that's the path that a business goes on, right? Every single business goes through that cycle, right? It starts, you have this good stage, hopefully for quite a long period of time, it gets to its pinnacle and eventually has to drop. And so you want to buy it at the good stage. Now, how do you know there are mature businesses? The whole key to determining that you're going to get a business that, first of all, is going to do well with you as the owner, because you may be buying a good business, but if you're the wrong person to operate it, it's going south in a hurry.
Yeah.
Conversely, there's a lot of good businesses run by the wrong owners.
Yeah, totally. It's a huge concern, right? If somebody's listening to this right now, sure, I want to buy a business, but how do I know I'm a good operator of that type of business, especially if it's outside my lane?
Well, that's the key, is it can't be outside your lane. That's where people make a mistake. The fundamental thing, if you were to ask me, like as far as hanging up a target of what's the most important thing in this process, you have to buy a business that's right for you. So it's very important to understand there are good businesses that are run by the wrong people. And similarly, if you're the wrong person to operate a business, that good business is going to go into the toilet pretty quickly. There's not like buying real estate, where even if you overpay for a property, time heals every real estate error.
Yeah, it'll appreciate over time. Sure.
Yeah, if you have the time that can service the debt, the building will still be there. You buy the wrong business, you're out of business in a year. And so, but similarly, your upside is much greater, because if you're the right person. So the mantra that I always tell people is the following. First of all, there's two things to consider. Number one, don't confuse expertise with experience. Just because you've been in a certain sector, right, of healthcare or manufacturing or distribution or whatever sector you've been, that is experience. Okay, that's not expertise. Expertise is what you did within that experience, whether it be in sales, operations, logistics, planning, putting a team together, identifying opportunities and executing, marketing, advertising, whatever the case may be. That's your expertise. And now when you're buying a business, there's not like going for a job interview where you can bullshit a little bit just to get the job and you figure it out after you get going. You can't make mistakes. You're not learning on someone else's dime anymore. So the mantra is, whatever it is that you do best has to be the single most important driving factor of the revenue and profits of any business you consider purchasing. If you marry your greatest skill, and everybody has a greatest skill, if you marry your greatest skill to the business that needs that, you're going to be successful. There are going to be ups, there's going to be downs. That's business ownership. But you will avoid that issue that you raised of buying someone else's problem if you buy a business that's perfectly suited for your skill set. That's why I don't believe in buying distressed businesses. That's why I don't believe in buying garbage businesses. People look, well, you buy distressed garbage, but if you buy a garbage business, could never be priced cheap enough. Now, as far as the valuation is concerned, so what if you overpay?
Right, because now it's like, oh, like the valuation is going to make it look like it's a winner or exciting because you're not paying as much. But if it's a garbage business,
it's garbage any way you strike it. But however, if you buy a good business, let's assume this is how we talked about earlier, how people want to envision their lives. Your goal for buying a business, first of all, it can't just be financial. That could be one of the things, because if you focus just on the money, it's not going to work out very well. Never does. But you're buying a business, okay, you hate your job, you don't like it, you don't see an upside. So you want to buy a business because you don't want restrictions put on your upside. You're going to have a chance to build something. You have the opportunity to help other people, right, and improve their lives. You're going to have the joy of getting up every morning, and there's going to be ups, there's going to be downs, but you're going to, by and large, you're going to really enjoy what you're doing. You're going to build value over time. You're going to be able to exit it and recover and get a tremendous return on your investment if you do it properly. And for all of that, you're going to get paid during this whole time frame.
Mm.
So who cares if you pay a little too much? Big deal. I mean, you're buying all these magnificent benefits
Yeah.
if you do it the right way, and it's very doable. I mean, we're not talking about sending men to the moon here. Buying a business is not it's not difficult. It's just complicated.
But I think that's what I think for me anyway, I could see where that's the fear sometimes is what I do isn't complicated. What I know isn't complicated, right? And in my business, because I built this model over the last 10, 15 years. But to do something that I'm passionate about, that I'm excited about, do something that would bring me joy to wake up in the morning, all those things are great. And yet there's still the learning curve of, if I've never done retail before, to get into retail might not be the smartest thing, or maybe it could be, but I don't know if I want to have that learning curve, right? Um, Getting over the stuff that the fear of course, every business has fear in it, but getting over the fear of how do I enter into a new realm of my business? Like we talked about earlier, some people might want to be starting new types of careers or going from one thing to another. That's a big deal to get over that fear, or that fear of doing it. And it sounds like part of what you do is almost in some ways not counseling, but support people in that fear and that concern and what they're going through.
The observation of the fear is really important, because you should have a very healthy combination of fear and excitement during this process. So the fear is going to force you to be diligent. The excitement is going to keep you going when you get knocked off the path because a deal doesn't work out, or you find a business that the seller represented, they're making X, and you find it's X minus 50%, and you have to, get back on your horse again. And so having a good, healthy combination of those two emotions is really is a perfect recipe, right?
Isn't that really the truth in almost everything, right? Like, you think about that, and relationships and business, you do have to have that healthy combination of both the fear and excitement.
100% agree. I like to look at it, and it's also like, no matter how much work that you've done, first of all, you're never going to buy a perfect business. There's always warts and blemishes. There's no such thing as a perfect business. But even I tell clients, and I do a ton of hold handing. That's what I bring. I believe brings tremendous value to our clients, because their situations, emotional and otherwise, they may be going through, and explaining to them that it's normal. But I like to tell people is, if the closing of the transaction becomes anticlimactic. If it's not, then you got a problem. And by that, I mean, when you get to the actual closing, you think you're going to be doing backflips, that you're so excited. But it's actually, if you do it properly and methodically, it's just one more step in the process. You just know you got there in a meaningful way, right? It's like sometimes you're so eager for something, and then when it happens, because you've done so much preparation, you're less excited than you thought you would be, right? The other thing is, if you sleep well before the night of the closing, you probably shouldn't buy the business.
I was going to say, because it's
just
that
just
feeling
part of
of
it.
now you've got a lot more decisions you can make. Whereas up
Yes.
till then it was, what would I do, or what will I do eventually, get there. Do you have a favorite, and I know we're running short on time, but I would love to know, do you have like a favorite success story of a business that you helped someone else buy and it turned into like a sweet deal for them, or it was everything they hoped they wanted and more?
I'm going to give you three short ones.
Okay.
One of them is a friend of mine, Gary Ellswig. And I say a friend because he became a friend. He bought my course a number of years ago. Then he ended up hiring me as a consultant. And then he was in the engineering business, but decided that he should actually, we looked for a ton of businesses. We couldn't find one to buy. He started one, and then we made a bunch of acquisitions afterwards. And he built that business into multi-$100 million company, exited a few times. He's a brilliant guy, engineer, and he's done unbelievable.
Was it in the engineering field, or was it
Yes.
something totally? It was interesting.
Okay. The other one is a gentleman who I spoke to, and has actually just made a video testimonial for me recently. His name is Don Wilson, who is in the financial services businesses. okay, in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Okay.
And I believe it was, forget the name, I think it was Primerica that he worked for.
Ah, yeah.
And he ended up leaving. He bought a candy retail business, which was nothing to do with his
Yeah,
experience.
that's what I say. That's that.
However, it has everything to do with his expertise because he dealt one-on-one with people. And in
Mm,
retail, he's standing behind the counter, he's dealing one-on-one with people. And
yeah,
so
yeah.
that's a perfect example of experience versus expertise. He started off, he bought my course, started with $30,000 to make an investment in this business, got an SBA loan, some seller financing, built it up to multi-locations, subsequently sold it, bought a bunch of other locations, has exited as a multi-millionaire, now lives in Venice, Florida, and he is just a wonderful man, a wonderful guy. And he's really counseled his son Anthony. Both of them were on a Zoom call with me not long ago, and we walked through this whole experience. So that's a beautiful story.
Nice.
And really like just salt of the earth guy. Another one is actually in Canada, who also recently spoke with. He just posted a nice thing on LinkedIn about us, and goes back. It's a number of years. His name is Iggy Domagalski. He bought my course, subsequently bought 10 businesses, built it up to over $200 million in revenue, sold it to a company called Wajax in Canada, which is a company that's older than Canada. And then
Wow.
he became the CEO of Wajax. And he has sent me the amount of people that have bought my materials as a result of him is mind-boggling. He even trained
Wow.
his whole staff about making acquisitions. I mean, it's crazy how many have people have acquired it. So, I'm happy to say that our testimonials, like we've redesigned our website recently. It's not even launched yet. Like even the people that were doing the website saying like, we could have 50 pages of testimonials. I have so many testimonials.
That's
I
so
can't
great.
even post them. I have them in my garage in binders because I'm an old fashioned guy. So I like to print them out. Right. And
Yeah.
so I have boxes of them, binders full, 3 ring
Wow.
binders full in the garage. Just so if you have like 40 hours one week and you want me to walk through all of the wonderful stories, I'm happy to do it because you can see during the clippings, it brings a big smile to my face. We've helped so many. That's the greatest part of what I do. I mean, so those are
That's
three I think
very
from the
cool.
top of my head, but
Cool.
it's just an incredible boatload of success stories, which is like there's nothing better for my heart than that, right?
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Thanks for sharing that. I did have to ask another question though, because you mentioned it and I thought about it earlier. I forgot about it and then you brought it back up. So you mentioned there's some seller financing in one of the deals. I'm assuming and quite a bit of this, you could find some really great ways for creative financing that would go into a lot of these type of deals for the right people.
The way we teach people is seller financing is critical. I would personally never buy a business without it. 91% of our clients get seller financing.
Interesting.
If you can't get the seller to put skin in the game, though that alone tells you what they think about the future of the business, unless they have a mitigating situation where they must get money because it's a medical issue and
Sure.
that type of thing. But if that's the case, well, I feel sorry for them, but you need to leverage that and really take advantage of it, and so they need to take a significant haircut on their price and terms. So yes, seller financing, it's the way deals get done. They've in the lower market, it's been the way for decades. It's and personally, I wouldn't buy a business without it
I think it's
because
really interesting philosophy. It's so true, right? If they don't believe in the future of this business enough,
sell it to someone else.
yeah.
Right, yeah.
Wow.
And so there's buying, the myth in this world is you could buy businesses for no money down. That doesn't exist. You can buy businesses with a tremendous amount of leverage,
Hmm.
good leverage, seller financing. The other thing is if the business, God forbid, runs into any trouble, right, you have a lot more leverage with the seller. They don't want the business back if you have to
Sure.
renegotiate the loan or take a a holiday from paying them for a while if you should run into any difficulty. So again, I'm in the midst of writing this updated report related to the recession and COVID and the impact on business sale. One of the things that I talk about is don't buy a business without seller financing.
Love it. Love it. All right. Well, geez, we could probably talk like this forever. Like you said, if we had 40 hours to talk about more of the people. Richard, this is amazing. And for anybody listening, I hope I, first of all, asked the questions that you were thinking that you wanted to ask. But second of all, go check him out on his website. Like I said, I've gone through it. I've looked at a lot of different stuff because I want to get to know Richard a little bit more. It's just richardparker.com. Is there any other places that they can reach you, any social media or stuff like that they can reach you?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. The guides are also sold on a sister company called Diomo, which is doing it, the abbreviation for doing it on my own.com. But richardparker.com is the best place because I have hundreds of articles that are free.
Oh yeah.
There's never any pressure. If someone wants to just learn about it, you could spend days reading through great articles about every facet of the process on richardparker.com. So it's where I'd highly recommend that you take yourself and educate yourself. And of course, if anybody ever wants to get in touch with me, there's contact pages on those. Feel free, anybody, I encourage, contact me directly. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. And certainly someone wants to jump onto a call with some pressing questions. It's a joy for me to do that.
Yeah, I think it's really smart. There's a lot of people that I know are listening who are in the private practice space, right? Doctors, dentists, orthodontists, chiropractors, and there's a big wave of selling businesses right now. And there's also some that are trying to go out and buy more. And I think just the information and knowledge, I like that you said almost 80% of all transactions are the same, because I can see where somebody's like, well, you don't understand the dental space, the ortho space, or whatever the space is that they're listening to, that they're in, or that they're listening from. Uh, just getting an outside perspective, I'm always a huge fan of that. Getting somebody like Richard to sit down and you ask the questions, and if he doesn't have the answers, I'm sure he knows where to find the answers. But I'd be surprised if out of all these years he hasn't run into something that you have come up against. And so I would just highly recommend even just going and having that conversation and asking the question. Richard's put himself out there for all of you listening to do so. So jump on it for sure. Richard, we always end our show with 4 specific questions around your role. Would you be willing to play?
Absolutely. What do I
All
win?
right.
What do I have a chance to win?
Just a good feeling.
Perfect. Let's go.
A red Chicago hockey jersey is what you win.
No, I don't want Chicago. I want a Montreal Canadiens jersey. That's what it's in the back of
Oh,
me.
okay. See, that's how bad I am with sports. I have
but
no idea.
but Chicago has actually, I think, the nicest jersey in all the
I
professional
shot
sports.
my shot and I was completely wrong.
The Chicago Blackhawks have the nicest jersey, but I'm a Montreal Canadiens fan.
Nice. First question. What is the highest and greatest responsibility that you have on this earth?
Taking care of my family.
What do you want as the ultimate outcome for your life to be?
I want people to say he was a good guy.
What do you consider true leadership to be?
Making everybody better around you.
And last, unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to look at it, we all will have that one final day on this life experience. Throughout this experience between now and dead, what experience do you hope or want to have before that day comes?
Wow. Besides the obvious ones of spending as much possible time as I can with my family, I want to go fly fishing to Alaska.
Oh, nice. Put that on your list. You can make that happen.
I could make that happen. It's just sheer laziness that I haven't. I'm just waiting for the right time. But yes, that's something. But I don't want that at the top of the pyramid because there's family stuff, of course. But that would be the one thing.
Cool experience. Well, it's been an amazing experience having you on the show today and getting to know you even more and having you share your story, even though it's, I know, a tiny fraction of the story you could share. But thank you for taking the time to do that with us today.
Well, I really appreciate you having me here, and you asked terrific questions, and hopefully it's provided some value and interest for your listeners.
I have no doubt about that. And speaking of our listeners, thank you all for joining us on the Own Your Role podcast. Remember to please subscribe and get alerts so that when we do send out the new podcast, that you can be alerted of when it's available.